Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today I'm going to be talking about some fantasy football players this season in rounds 1 through 4 of 12-team leagues that I consider to have league-winning upside. This is a pretty rare trait this early on in the draft, and it's not too often that we find players with this caliber of upside. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the safest picks. It doesn't mean that they're 100% of the time must-own players. But these are guys that can make the difference in your leagues if they hit this year and be big-time players for us this season. So before we get started today, head down, give today's video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. And go check out the 2021 Draft Guide collection if you're still looking for in-depth help with your fantasy football leagues. It's a one-time payment. It's the best value out there on the fantasy market. And we've got a ton of information for you to take advantage of, from big board rankings to draft day cheat sheets to updated player profiles and analysis. We've got that J.K. Dobbins injury, which I'm going to start today's video off by talking about briefly here for a second, because that's obviously something crucial. And even though it doesn't exactly mesh perfectly into the topic of today's episode, it's worth bringing up. So there's a ton of stuff in there. We'll talk about that more as we go. But without further ado, let's hit that intro and get straight into today's video. Alrighty, so as mentioned in the intro, we're going to just talk briefly about this Ravens backfield situation here with J.K. Dobbins having what looked like a not-so-nice injury to end off that preseason game for the Ravens last night. It's their 20th consecutive win, but obviously you lose a key contributor in the process. Literally overnight, this is the fastest I've seen Sleeper's ADP, like, literally jolt itself in a 12-hour time span. Gus Edwards' ADP went from being like a middle of the pack RB3, even an RB4 almost, because he was a handcuff, a very good one at that, but still a handcuff. And now his ADP has crept into the 60s, and J.K. Dobbins is now down past the 100 marker. So we've got a big shift here. Clearly the fantasy community is bracing itself for not good news. I saw something from the fantasy doctors. Best case scenario, he said that if JK avoided season-ending injury, you're looking at like a 6 to 9 week recovery timeline here, which isn't ideal, but at least you could get him back at some point this season. Clearly, though, if it was an ACL or anything of that magnitude, it's season over. We're wrapping things up for J.K. Dobbins, and we won't see him this year. But the good news is, at least for owners of J.K. Dobbins, a lot of them also had Gus Edwards, because he is, again, a very good handcuff, and he had some standalone fantasy value prior to that injury, where he was a heavy goal line back. He's not the fastest, most explosive guy, but he got his touches in this offense, and he had his usage right there. So something to at least hang your hat on here. He's a quality RB2 start in my play, or in my book here, if you're going to have to use him now that J.K. Dobbins, at least at bare minimum, won't be with us to start the season. So Gus Edwards in the draft guide will instantly become classified as a must-own player at this point. We'll see exactly where his ADP settles into here. I literally just did a rankings overhaul, and then that night, once I finalized things, of course, this news happens, which is killer to the top of the board. So I'll be doing another one of those and adjusting that accordingly based off of however I feel that Gus Edwards will fit into things here, based on the news we hear when this comes out. And by the time this video is live in a couple hours, we very well might have a better idea of exactly what J.K. Dobbins is dealing with here today. But with that being said, before we get into our first league-winning upside player here, go check out the SFS Community Discord. It is a great way to interact with other fantasy players here on the SFS channel. Join fantasy leagues if you're still looking to become a part of one of those. We've got paid leagues going on in there. I've also got some free leagues that I'm in just for fun to participate with you all this season. You can hop in some community mock drafts through that Discord server. And there's just other stuff, discussions and whatnot, and we just chat football on there. So if you want to become a part of that, we'd love to have you. We're creeping towards 50 members, and we would love to have that number growing at a rapid rate. So with that being said, starting things off here, our first league-winning upside player. This is one of the more unusual ones, the most extreme scenario here for me today. That, of course, is Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Now, as I said in the intro, this is not a foolproof pick. Saquon is not going to come out here and guarantee to hit his upside. There's a lot of risk here. The Giants are no perfect offensive situation. I have been very high on Saquon Barkley this offseason. He's getting his first live reps. All the news we're hearing is good, trending in the right direction, but he's still playing behind the Giants' offensive line. And although it might be an improved offensive line, although it might be trending in the right direction, this is still not an elite group. It would be generous to say they're probably an average team. The good news is we've seen Saquon produce with this level or worse of players around him in the past, but it's still not something that is like, oh yes, I feel really excited about that. The other thing is Daniel Jones and his turnovers. If this Giants team, which is a very, very good roster, I truly believe they're just a few critical pieces away from being a serious contender, they could potentially shoot themselves in the foot and take away one of their best assets, that being Saquon in the run game. If they're not playing efficient football, if they're getting into holes, trailing early. I've had Saquon as high as my RB2 overall this offseason. Now, various news came out. This was earlier on in the summer before we knew that there was speculation he might not be ready to go for week 1. That seems like it's kind of faded out of the picture here. But at the end of the day, the risk is what's keeping him down draft boards. You're talking about a player you can get in the dead center of the first round in 12-team leagues at the 6th overall pick. His ADP is 5.8, so round that up to the next pick, 6th overall. That's insane upside. He has better upside than anyone, arguably, even more so, I would say, than Christian McCaffrey. Now, Christian McCaffrey has a lot better of a chance to actually hit that fantasy ceiling and to actually be the player that we're expecting him to be at that 1.1 overall pick. But Saquon has the upside that can match that. It's just the floor is worse and the situation is less desirable. That's why he's being drafted a little bit later on here. Jonathan Taylor's another guy in the draft guide rankings here recently. I did knock him down a spot or two, but the upside, that's what today's video is about. League-winning upside is still there. You've got your question marks about your floor, I'm sure, with Carson Wentz's health, Quentin Nelson coming back in this offense, some COVID cases lately. I get it. I understand. It's valid. It's a reason to be a little bit skeptical potentially of this. But man, with running backs dropping like flies right now, they are incredibly valuable. And when you look at a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who's being drafted in a lot of cases after a Nick Chubb, who I think is a very comparable player to Taylor, in addition to the fact that Jonathan has some additional usage that Nick doesn't exactly get in that Browns offense, there's a lot of stuff to like here. Jonathan Taylor has one of the best offensive lines in pro football. He did lose his left tackle last year to retirement. But other than that, this is a very, very strong 4 out of 5 guys for this Colts team. They do have some quality players that can play left tackle, but they brought in was Eric Fisher from the Chiefs, who is at least starting the year recovering from injury, so that won't be an immediate impact play. But if Carson Wentz can stay out of trouble here, this is similar to the Daniel Jones situation, and he can be 2017 Wentz, it literally feels like forever ago. That's 4 years. I'm not even going to ask him to be that, but if he can at least be a quality game manager, bring the picks, the turnovers down, and play efficient football under Frank Reich, who has coached him to the best football in his career, this offense could be humming. Jonathan Taylor should be the focal point, the engine, what makes this team run. And I love that because when he gets in the open field, he has great, very excellent straight line speed. He ran track at UW-Madison and was very good on the track as well as on the football field. He's got the power. He can be utilized as a goal line back. The one thing that infringes upon his ability to be used in the passing game is Nyheim Hines. But JT was still used in that fashion last year despite Hines' extended involvement in that part of the game. So other people will have their concerns about Marlon Mack and what he brings to the table, what issues he presents. I think that I've talked about this briefly throughout the offseason here. It's not the end of the world for me if Marlon Mack comes in and sees 5, 6, maybe even up to 8 touches per game, because we have been seeing other guys like Jordan Wilkins and whatnot sprinkled in throughout year 1. JT's got an excellent division schedule. He gets the Jags, the Texans, and the Titans twice a year each. Fantastic matchups there. The ceiling is sky high on a given week. Like I said, he can score touchdowns, break open into space, make those explosive plays happen. There's a lot of things to like here, while there is also, at the same time, I concede that there is drawbacks and potential risks here. We're looking at a thin running back group this season, you guys. It might not be the flashy pick to take Jonathan Taylor at the end of the first round in your 10 or 12-man leagues, but at the end of the day, the running backs you're going to get later on are slowly deteriorating because running backs are being pushed up the board right now. We've seen Cam Akers go down already. That was a while back, but that's a significant one. He was a top 12 running back. J.K. Dobbins was a fringe running back one going in the early to mid-second round of 12-team leagues. That's going to push everyone else up. It doesn't necessarily mean that they got better or their value is rising, But at least in terms of the positional scarcity that is being created at the running back spot, that is what's driving value upwards and making these players more and more desperately needed and urgent picks to be made for your team. So I would hate to see you pass on a running back of Jonathan Taylor's caliber early. Now, if there's some extreme situation, if you want to take a Travis Kelce over him, that's all right. You could try and debate me based off of who's on the board. If you want to take a Devontae Adams or your top receiver in the first round and come back and get one of those top-end running backs in the second round. But if you can't promise me or guarantee that that player is going to be there, I can assure you a player closer to that wide receiver's value and production potential will be there in the second, whereas you might get left high and dry at the running back spot. So make sure we're capitalizing on this position early. That's something I hit home hard in the draft guide this year. I talk about that. There's a lot of running backs in the must-own players list. We've got rounds 1 through 20 of 12-team leagues where basically I have a master list. You just click on the round you want to see. I'll pop that up on the screen right now. You click on the round and it brings you the master list and tells you everyone in that round whose ADP falls within that range and who I think is must grab in that territory. So that's a great tool for you all this season. We've also got some sleeper and some bust master lists in there that work the same way that would be great to take advantage of. Najee Harris. This is another one where in the rookie class this season, he is the running back that gives you the potential to finish as a top tier running back by the end of the season. Jonathan Taylor finished as the RB5 last year, but he wasn't that good the whole season. He wasn't a chump, but he wasn't a RB1 for the majority of the year. He finished strong. He finished the year on a very rapid pace, putting up great numbers. That's what carried him to the finish line. Najee Harris can do that this season, and I think at a more efficient clip. It took Taylor a while to understand blocking schemes, to get his feet underneath him, and adjust to the NFL game. He had no preseason action, which clearly, honestly, I don't think was a concern at all because at this point, I'm tired of seeing my running backs drop like flies in the preseason right now. We've got ETN down now, and I just talked about Akers and Dobbins. We're losing guys left and right. So, again, do not let yourself get too thin at that running back core. It's a lot easier to build through the draft and have emergency depth there than it is to try and recoup that value and that level of talent in your lineups afterwards via trade or the waiver wire. It's a dangerous game to play. But nonetheless, Najee has gotten some preseason reps. He's had training camp, which is huge, those joint practices. This is a 3-down player. And for a guy of his size who can really catch the ball, that becomes a deadly fantasy weapon. He's kind of a weird older rookie. I believe he's almost 23 years of age if he isn't already, which especially for a running back seems a bit odd. But he perfectly fits what I think a Pittsburgh Steelers running back looks like. I said this a lot throughout the draft when I was making mocks about the actual NFL draft back in April. He just seems like a Steeler to me, a physical running back who also has the tool set and the skills to be a dynamic 3-down player, be the goal line back. He will literally be their preferred option, I believe, in every situation on the field. There won't be a passing down back that's going to come in and overtake him for snaps there. There's not going to be a Benny Snell that walks in and steals a significant amount of goal line carries from him. I think that as long as Najee Harris is healthy this season, it's going to be his show. And the Steelers, if they learned anything from last year, know they have to bring down the amount they threw the football because their rate of throwing passes was ridiculous last year. They were insanely inefficient. Their offensive linemen never got into a groove. They're dropping back like literally 45, 50 times a game. It was awful. So the Steelers have 3 dang good receivers, but they have to find a way to become a more balanced football team this year, and that will in turn help them play to their strengths because that defense is really good. But when you're going 3 and out because you throw 3 flat routes and Deontay Johnson, love the guy, but drops 2 of them. I mean, Juju and Chase Claypool have their issues with the butters as well, but it's starting to become a problem. Najee Harris can not only save the Steelers, but he can also be an insanely high upside pick for your team in the second round of essentially any league format this year. Antonio Gibson, this is one I am very, very high on here. I don't mean to say something that is too hot of a take here, but when you look at his upside with his usage, his skill set, his dynamic playmaking ability, the upside is Christian McCaffrey. Now, the chances he actually gets that far and actually becomes a Christian McCaffrey level producer is very, very small. But that is exactly how his game is catered. That is his role in this Washington football team offense. And if he's able to do that, now there's clearly a gap in talent here because Christian McCaffrey was an early first-round pick, and I think Antonio Gibson, if I recall, was a third or fourth-round selection for Washington last year. That doesn't mean you can't be a great player. Look at Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, etc. from that 2017 class. It just shows me that the level of faith, involvement, and usage they are going to bestow upon him this year is going to give us a lot of numbers. And even looking at Carolina, McCaffrey is giving us those numbers despite not being in a top 5 offense, despite not being on a title contending team. I would say a lot of players, or excuse me, a lot of fans don't think Washington football team is that. And although they are probably overall still less dynamic than Carolina's offense is as a whole, McCaffrey's been putting up these insane numbers with Kyle Allen as his quarterback, who, by the way, is in Washington right now and who made those comments about the Christian McCaffrey role for Gibson. He did it with Cam Newton when he was certainly out of his prime, or at least in his best playing days as a Panther were behind him. And then last year, in just 3 games, he still got it done with Teddy Bridgewater. So just to kind of prove my point here, everything doesn't have to be perfect to have a great fantasy football season, to have a great fantasy situation. The usage is right. It's there. The offensive line isn't crazy good, but this is still a player who, when you talk about how he can catch passes, be used on the goal line, he showed us last year he is going to score touchdowns in both the running and receiving game. And then he can just be a solid running back. This is going to give us insane value in, I think, all scoring formats, but in PPR plays, Antonio Gibson has a chance to be a lethal start in lineups, and you could potentially snatch him up as your running back too, which in that scenario, he would absolutely be a league-winning player because of the heights that he could reach. You see he finished as RB13 there last season, despite missing a couple of games with some turf toe last year. David Montgomery here. This one is another player I have been super high on this offseason. There's a lot of David Montgomery hate that goes around. I understand the risk here, and again, these are not foolproof players. There's a reason that this isn't a must-own players video because, that slightly doesn't necessarily mean that they are always bust-proof players either. I guess that would be the title of that video. But there is a dynamic and an element here where the ceiling is just too good to not take at most spots. You're talking about a late 3rd round, sometimes early 4th, but if you want to make sure you can secure his production for your team, you're probably looking at needing to draft him in the 3rd round. A running back at this spot on the board who is getting volume that nobody else is. I don't think that there are more than a couple other names at this particular range that have the chance to see the workload that David Montgomery can see for the Bears offense this season. The line is not good. That's the one thing that makes me very worried here, but we've seen players overcome it in the past. Think about an undrafted rookie in James Robinson last season who dealt with a very below-average offensive line and a very bad football team and still finished as the RB7 last year. Montgomery himself finished as RB4 for Chicago this previous season after having one of the hottest finishes to the 2020 year. It's possible. It can be done. Something that I think digs a little bit into his workload that we kind of forget about was not present last season was Tariq Cohen's pass catching ability, but David Montgomery still wasn't a featured back in the passing game. It might hurt a little bit. It might impact his numbers slightly, but I still think that where he gets his value at is on the ground, running the football near the goal line. He's got excellent ability to put his shoulder down and finish in that area of the field. This just is a situation I love a lot. And again, if Justin Fields, as I'm projecting for this offense, can take it to the next level and help this team just score overall more points, the Bears will be on the field more. They'll have more opportunities to sustain drives, keep things rolling, and ultimately just spread more production out to their viable fantasy players, your Darnell Mooney's, Allen Robinsons, David Montgomery's. Heck, we might even see Cole Kmet get in there and be a nice sleeper tight end this season. A little tidbit there, another piece of that draft guide that we're giving some sneak peeks away for today. But yeah, David Montgomery, a player I think it's incredibly hard to pass on, and the running back group being as thin as it is, it's a very tough decision to pass on him, and it's something that I find myself doing very, very rarely, as I have owned a lot of shares of him so far this season, either as an RB2 or an RB3. Transitioning into some wide receivers now, I've got 3 of these names up on the board. I don't think I prefaced this specifically to start off today's video, but these are early round league-winning upside players. Again, I said this was, I think I did say this in the intro actually, a rare territory where it's hard to win your leagues with your first 4 picks. It's a lot easier to lose them. But these are the players that I think have the slim shot or the rare shot to come out there and have upside at either their ADP. They give you insane value that sets you above the bar and the rest of the competition in your league formats. So I'll kind of explain that a little bit more with this pick here. Calvin Ridley is my wide receiver for this fantasy football season. My wide receiver rankings, my top 24 just came out yesterday, so go check that video out if you haven't done so yet. Calvin Ridley is a player who I think has dang near the same upside as the 4 or 5 wide receivers that are drafted before him almost every time in league drafts. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, heck, even DK Metcalf sometimes. Ridley is going in the back end of the second round, and his upside, it goes punch for punch with those players. Maybe he doesn't hit his ceiling nearly as often as those guys, but he plays for a pass-happy Falcons offense. The top target in his offense is no longer there. Julio Jones is a Tennessee Titan now. He will have Kyle Pitts, but I don't think we would expect Kyle Pitts to come in year one as a rookie and immediately completely take over Julio Jones' entire usage rate and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Ridley will be the top dog this year. He showed us pristine route running, the ability to be an alpha, to go up and make the plays, to be available in the moment. He had one dud last season where he was held catchless against Jair Alexander and the Green Bay Packers. But other than that, the dude was a superstar. And if you can finish as the wide receiver 4 when having that type of a game and then missing another contest on top of it due to injury, your ceiling's pretty dang good. You're showing us that you can produce high-end numbers in the games you are available for us. And last year was one of the best and most available seasons for Ridley to this point in his career. So I love what I see here. Again, the value that you can pick him at on the board in respectfully to that, how the upside then gives you an advantage here. That's why he has league-winning potential. It's not because I think that he's a shoo-in to be better than those other players. I think it's because he can give you similar, if not dang close to the same production while being drafted a significant chunk of time later. And that's something I'll touch on again here in just a second with the last position I'm going to talk about today, quarterbacks. But we've got a couple more wide receivers. Terry McLaurin for the Washington football team. He's my wide receiver 11 right now. Name a wide receiver that is outside the top 10 going as a third-round draft pick that, again, could potentially skyrocket himself right into the mix. You're looking at a year 3 breakout. I think that while I'm making a breakout players video in a couple days here, he will certainly be considered and tossed around in that list, in that episode. This is a player who can kind of put things all together this season. He's been very, very productive, very good at stretching the field in his first 2 NFL years, and I'm a big fan of what he brings to the table as a player. Now he's got the quarterback that will push the ball downfield for him. Dwayne Haskins would do that every once in a while. Kyle Allen, and Alex Smith would give him looks. But I don't think he's really had a true gunslinger like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is not afraid to air it out. Terry might be one of the best receivers that Fitzmagic's had in a couple seasons now. Obviously playing the last 2 years with the Dolphins. Before that, he was in Tampa where he had a loaded core. But Terry should be able to do some pretty big things here. Just think back to what he was doing in that season where Jameis and Fitzmagic were kind of duking it out every week for who was going to be the starter there. I think the sky's the limit here. He could potentially finish a lot higher than wide receiver 11. Again, it's no lock to do so. And I think he might have some ugly games this year. I've talked about that a lot as well. The risk is certainly present. But again, you don't get this type of upside with a lot of other positions in the third round of drafts. I would much rather hit my running backs, get me a top-end RB in round 1, find a Najee Harris, an Antonio Gibson early in round 2, and if somehow a Terry falls to me and can be my wide receiver 1 in that third round, I'm feeling great about my draft. I'm feeling like my upside is sky high, and I'm able to come full steam ahead into the NFL season. So these are the type of players I'm targeting this year because I think that you know what Bruce Arians says? No risk it, no biscuit. You don't want to risk yourself too much, put too much dependency on boom-bust players being hit. But I wouldn't say Terry is classified just yet as a boom-bust player. He certainly has some floor element, and that talent will help him produce at least solid numbers even in his down week. So hopefully you can start to kind of get the picture I'm painting here. Ceedee Lamb is my 4th round high upside league-winning wide receiver here. Ceedee I talked about in yesterday's video in the wide receiver rankings, obviously Terry McLaurin as well. Ceedee I've got 1 slot behind, Terry McLaurin there. I was actually just looking. Ceedee Lamb and Amari Cooper are now under 2 spots on ADP separated from one another, so they are literally as close as it gets for those two Dallas wideouts being drafted right on top of each other. Ceedee, I just think, has better upside here, and I think that he has the better chance to be a wild success this season. We've seen the best of Amari Cooper, I think. We know what we're going to get from him. Your high-end expectations have already been laid down and in place. Ceedee was a rookie last year. We did not see the best from him. The best from him came in his first 5 NFL games when Dak Prescott was starting and obviously was lost to that bad ankle injury. Now he comes back this year. It was only a 5-target differential between him and Cooper with Dak on the field. And I think that Ceedee asserts himself as the number 1 in this offense this year. I'm thinking the team lead in targets at minimum. I think he'll outscore Amari Cooper in the end zone. And at the end of the day, maybe Amari can make a run with some really efficient yardage production. But I think Ceedee might just get him there as well. It's going to be a very, very high-volume passing offense. It's going to be a high-volume offense in general, if that makes sense. They're going to be running the ball a lot and throwing the ball because their defense will not be on the field that much, because teams are going to move the ball down the field and score on them, and they have to turn around and answer. So there's going to be a lot of chances. It's going to be better than last year, for sure. That's secondary. You've got a year of improvement, maybe better defensive coaching with the former, I'm looking at him right now in my head, the former Atlanta Falcons head coach, Dan Quinn, is stepping in as the Dallas defensive coordinator. You've got guys returning. Micah Parsons looks like a big add, but this is still going to be a team that has a lot of offensive production to go around. Dak is supposed to be healthy. He's supposed to be off his pitch count. No limitations going forward. That's big news for Ceedee Lamb here. That also helps me feel more comfortable about his floor, whereas maybe a week ago I was still saying these things about his ceiling, but I had a little bit more hesitancy to hardly push him because of the fact that he seemed like a more risky player just a week ago. But following that news, he now seems a bit safer. Now these are rare. It's a bit harder in one quarterback leagues to find yourself this league-winning upside at this position. But these are two players who I think have penciled themselves in as having the upside that is the caliber of a player who can both do that and the draft price that helps you get there as well. Here's what I mean by that. This kind of goes back to the Calvin Ridley argument a little bit here. Kyler Murray is being drafted right now. His ADP is the 38.8, so you're looking at about an early 4th-round pick. That's the QB3 off the board. I have him ranked as my quarterback 2 in the draft guide right now. If you'd like to see the rest of my top 50 quarterbacks, you can head over and check that out. Link is in the description of today's video. But the thing that's so good here is the value, the difference in price between a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, and then a Kyler Murray, who I think potentially Kyler Murray has the upside and the ability to finish as the top quarterback in fantasy football this year. He led the league in rushing touchdowns last season. He's got one of the best receivers in the league who is a perfect security blanket. DeAndre Hopkins had 1,400 yards in his first year with the team with no practice, camp, training, offseason, none of that. And Kyler essentially has the skill set of a young Russell Wilson where he can just zing all over the field, weave in between defenders, pick up rushing yards. He's got one of the best deep balls in the league. He's got weapons all over the field. Christian Kirk is an underrated player. Rondale Moore, they just drafted in the 2nd round as a stud. AJ Green's a vet. There is a lot to like about this air raid offense. Cliff Kingsbury might be the worst coach in his division, but this offense is high-powered. You've got the right guy under center, and Kyler Murray has gotten majorly better from year 1 to year 2 in almost every trait that he's shown us to this point. So I love the fact that I can pick up Kyler as much as 2 rounds later than Pat Mahomes and almost an entire round later than a Josh Allen at times. Sometimes Josh Allen falls a little bit. Kyler Murray gets reached up for, and they go within 4 or 5 picks of one another. But overall, what the raw ADP numbers tell us is that they're separated by about 7.5, 8 draft picks. So there's a lot of great value here in terms of the upside you could potentially be getting. I think it's equal to those players who are going significantly earlier than him. Same situation here, Lamar Jackson. His ADP is actually in the 40s, so falling even further into that 4th round of 12-team leagues. Look, I'm making a bounce back candidates video for later on this week, or I guess maybe it'll be early at the top of next week. Lamar Jackson will certainly be a name featured on that list. Finished as quarterback 8 last year. And at face value, you might say, well, how is that a disappointing season? We were picking him as an early 2nd round pick last year. I think that if you think back and realize a lot of people were disappointed with Lamar's output last year. They weren't impressed coming off that MVP season. We were like, oh, we're going to see more rushing touchdowns, more passing volume. He's going to be even farther ahead as the QB1. The dude still averages the most fantasy points per game over the last 2 NFL seasons. He's a beast. He can do it all. Back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons as a quarterback, the only player to ever do so. I mean, you talk about upgrading his pass-catching weapons, getting Mark Andrews back this year. Hopefully, everything's good there. Rashad Bateman should be back by October, I'd expect, from his injury. Hollywood Brown's returning to the field soon. There's reason to have hope and faith. Sammy Watkins, we'll see how many games he plays. But this passing attack and the weapons surrounding him should be better than they were in 2020. On top of the fact that he is now entering year 4, continuing to progress as a passer, develop as a player. I'm hearing all this talk out there, and this is more of like the sports take media per se, about will the NFL figure out Lamar Jackson this season? No. You already know what you need to know about him. He's a inside zone read quarterback that if you let him get on the edge, kiss him goodbye. He is lightning quick, elusive as heck, can throw the football better than we give him credit for, and his fantasy upside as a result is punch for punch with every other player in the league. I would say his upside is higher than Mahomes. And at the end of the day, maybe he's not as consistent. Maybe he's not as safe as a player. But he's pretty dang close. And you can get him again as your QB4. Sometimes he even goes as the QB5. And I'm just scratching my head when I see that happen in leagues. But the point being here, for a player who has the potential to be the best at his position, you're getting him for a much more discounted price. It makes him a great value play. But that upside is still right there, which obviously is what goes along with today's video. Alrighty, that was roughly 10 players that I think have league-winning fantasy football upside this season in the first 4 rounds of those 12-team leagues. I would absolutely love, if you guys enjoyed today's video, to make another one of these episodes before draft season ends here with some middle or later round players and get into some other tier groups, break down some more guys, because I think that would be very beneficial to you all. So let me know down in the comment section below if you'd like to see that. One more time, go check out the draft guide collection. Time's running out. Draft season is winding down here. Get that. It's the best value in the fantasy market. It'll help you out big time. I'm happy to help you however I can. Drop questions down in the comment section. Interact with me. We want to make this the most interactive fantasy football channel on YouTube or in any space. Just drop down. We'll get back to you as soon as we can if we've got the time for you. We'd love to make that happen, and that's something that we prioritize here. We try to respond to every comment. When I see something pop up in my inbox, I check it probably 10, 15 times a day. I'm always typing back and answering as quickly as possible and getting you the information you need, helping you with trades, all that good stuff. So thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you're new around here, click that subscribe button. We'd love to have you stick around. Stay with us for this fantasy season. We'll make you league champs this year, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.